بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم صلوا على محمد وآل محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Tonight we have a special event, Raising Children in the West. The event will contain 3 sections. The first sections of the program will be presented by our community members, and each will present for about 15 minutes. Our speakers are Mr. Kayvan Dawalat Shahi and Mrs. Mina Dawalat Shahi and Mr. Abul Hassan. Hopefully he will be here soon. Am I too far from the speaker? Thanks. And Mr. Sayyid Husseini Yar. Thank you all for coming. We really appreciate it. The second section of the program will be specified for youth Q&A. So please be advised, I left a paper right there on the stand. It has the name of the speakers and a little space underneath it, so that way you could write the question for each speaker, so that way you don't forget the questions, because it will take about maybe 1 hour long. So keep in mind, if you ask the questions and you make a comment at the end, you may get candy. We have a few candies. So please try to grab a pencil and a piece of paper. It's really good, it's helpful. If you want to have questions, very, very nice event, and it has tons of information that you may need. The third section of the program will be specified for adult QA. I guess adult, you will be able to ask all the questions you need, and I'm definitely sure most of you already have some experience raising kids in the West.
No
Final.
No candy?
It depends. You may have to pay $1 for each answer if you want the truth. I need to raise money for the center too. Finally, dinner will be served around 9 p.m. So our announcement, this event will be recorded, but the video will not be uploaded on the YouTube. I think it will be just for private use for the center only.
It's going to be on YouTube, but the private one, not the public one.
Okay.
So
So it will be only our people can view it? Okay, well, thank you. All I know is they told me that it's going to be private. First speaker is Mr. Kayvan Dawalachi. Kayvan was born and raised in the Midwest. He attended public school in List Summit, Missouri, a suburb of Kansas City. He attended college. He attended KC College, which is Kansas City College, correct? Thank you. Kayvan will be sharing his experience growing up in the West. Please welcome our first speaker, Mr. Kayvan Dawalachi. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
صلوات. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So about 20 years ago, around this time, I sat alone in the library, filled with the sound of librarian chatter and school announcements, working on my alternative assignment. If anybody had seen me during that time, they probably would have figured I was in trouble, doing some form of detention. However, I was there because the rest of the class was practicing Christmas carols during music class. This was the solution that my parents had negotiated for me after I told them about our music class and their preparation for the Christmas holiday choir. They can sense my discomfort with the situation, but in retrospect, more than anything, I just really didn't want to sing. It was there that I thought about my situation as somebody different from the rest. Not that I hadn't before. I always remember the challenge of teaching everybody my name and the off-the-wall pronunciations I would get. or trying to get lunch in the cafeteria when most of the items had pork in it. I told people that I was allergic to pork, and after a while, I think I started to believe that. I always remember the annual "What did you get for Christmas?" classroom go-around, where I got to say nothing. And the teacher would say, "Oh, that's too bad. I feel bad for you. What about you, Jimmy?" You know, and so it's these kind of experiences that I was thinking about while I was doing that alternative assignment. But really, it's just where is my place in the society that I would ask. Where do I belong? If I was told as I was that American was the great Satan, does that mean all of my school friends were the little devils that come with it? So why would my dad raise me here if this country is so evil? Was I American? Was I Iranian American? Should I go by Kayvon? Should I go by Kevin? Is being Muslim worth it if it means I have to be different? Is pepperoni and bacon really as good as Americans say it is? Despite all of this, some of my most memorable experiences tended to be with those of the opposite faith. My first interaction with a Christian was in 4th grade. I was on the school bus, and he asked me what my religion was, and I told him I was Muslim. I think that had probably been the first time in his life that he had seen somebody of the opposite faith. And he was pretty shocked and very concerned about me because being a Christian, he told me vehemently that if I didn't believe in Jesus, I was going to go to hell. You can imagine this scared me very much when I was a young child because I hadn't heard about that either, and I was a little unsure of myself. I certainly didn't want to go to hell, and I didn't really have any arguments necessarily against what he was saying. So at that time, I decided to become half Christian and half Muslim on the bus. But he said that that wasn't good enough, that you had to be full Christian. And I wasn't really prepared to go that far. So I do remember the aching in my stomach I felt for that week, not really sure about what exactly my position was. Ironically enough, he became a staunch atheist later in high school. My other main interaction was in high school with a boy named Clint. He was one of my classmates that was kind of cut from a different cloth than most. He was intellectual, he was respectful, he was well-read for a guy his age. And he posed much more of a challenge than the 4th grader on that school bus. You know, he delved into philosophy, theology, and scripture in ways that I hadn't really seen before. And he took interest in me because not only because I had a different faith, but we would engage in those discussions, and we would have long conversations about the topics that he would bring up. And these discussions kind of began to occupy my mind throughout the day, and it would fill out my time at home. I would spend time reading about articles and watching videos over the topics we had discussed. And sometimes I would just skip lunch and go to the library and read about these kind of things. And it was during this time that I was exposed to a lot of new ideas, and I found my mindset shifting more from indifference to more eagerly gaining the knowledge that I was being exposed to and just trying to learn more. In fact, I remember him giving me a ride home one day from school, and he parked in my driveway. And it was one of those times where the car's still on, but you've been talking so long that you're thinking of turning off the car because you don't want to waste the gas. And after he turned off the car, we had probably been there for a few hours just talking. And we would have these discussions all the time. However, it wasn't long after that conversation that I found out that he had been killed in a car accident leaving his church. And this was really crushing to me because we had become good friends, and I really valued those conversations we had had. And this was actually the second close friend I had lost that year, both to being killed. And it was around these times I started to think more about death, about justice, about all these topics we had discussed. And it kind of led me to continue on these kind of studies that occupied me earlier. You know, as for my Muslim community growing up, it was always fragmented, and I never really felt that I had many friends my age or in my situation in the community that I had. We attended a Shia masjid that was pretty far away. It was about 1 hour away from where I lived, and it dealt with a lot of ethnic infighting and had a lot of division that eventually caused the masjid to split apart. And it got even worse to the extent that they had a scholar who was mediating the conflict and eventually ruled that one of the masjids was quote-unquote unlawful to go to. And so you can imagine there's a lot of discontentment going on, and it did lead us to slowly stop going to some of the activities over there. You know, there was a Sunni masjid that was near my house, but it never felt particularly welcoming. But it did serve the purpose of having some stability and having weekly Friday prayers. But I also couldn't help but notice that the term community was changing. Communities were no longer small and monolithic, your little village. We have multiple communities now. We have your classmates, your neighborhood friends, your family, school clubs, and increasingly now online communities. And many of these communities are completely independent of one another. And frankly, the Muslim community is just one of many communities there. But as I kind of realized early on, it was always the most disorganized, discohesive, and least serious of most of the ones that I was a part of. The few youth there felt like it was really more of an afterthought that was caught in a bunch of ethnic strife that was going on in the community. It was such instability that really led me to form my foundation of religion outside of that community and to ground it in more personal convictions I had fostered over the years by reading and talking with others. So despite all of these issues and things that, in my opinion, are not unique to me, why would you want your children to grow up here in the first place? Aren't you putting your children at risk? Well, for one thing, the Quran is clear that the best parents can have bad children, and the worst parents can have some of the best children. And great kids can arise in any environment. We can see that Prophet Nuh, alayhi salam, his son chose to follow a very different path than him. And this was a prophet whose own son entered hellfire because of his own choices. Then we also have, on the other hand, Prophet Ibrahim, alayhi salam, whose father himself was a brute and an idol worshiper. And he threatened to stone his own son and to burn him. And then we also have the examples of Prophet Musa and Prophet Yusuf, alayhi salam, who grew up in the household of pharaohs, both oppressive and an environment that you wouldn't expect to see a lot of Islam. And so each of these stories is really worth reflecting on how their children were raised and the conditions that they were lived under. But despite all this, and while all the challenges were there are plenty of great things about having children here. First, Muslims are thriving in America, in my opinion. According to the Pew Research poll, there are about 3 million Muslims in the U.S. today. And Islam is the fastest growing religion in the U.S. And in fact, in about 30 years, it's projected to be the second largest religion in the U.S. behind Christianity. And Muslims currently have the highest employment rate in the country, have the highest rate of full-time students, and are just as likely as any other family to live in a house earning at least $100,000. We have Muslims in Congress, we have Muslims in government positions all over the country, and we have Muslims of in all professions. Muslims are free to organize and practice their religion here, which we can't always say in Muslim majority countries. And despite the view of some in the Muslim community, I found the vast majority of Americans are respectful and interested to learn about your beliefs. I personally never felt disrespected for my beliefs or my ethnic heritage. Secondly, I think education and opportunity here are amazing. Your children can attend some of the best schools in the world here and can take jobs in important institutions. And you're putting your children in a position to learn and grow, which is really your obligation as a Muslim parent. You also have the chance to raise your children with a strength of two different backgrounds. For some, this can be in the form of different upbringings. For me personally, I had an American mother and an Iranian father. And so while one summer I'm visiting the bustling streets of Tehran, the next summer I could be picking potatoes in rural Kansas. And after a while, it felt normal that you can pass through these different cultures with more ease. And it's this very integration of cultures that I think produces some of the brightest minds I've seen among my peers. They're able to really meld together these different ways of thinking into a cohesive whole. They can bring the good from the East and the good from the West and apply it every day in their own lives. They can participate in American politics where they're aware of the international perspective. They can vote in an election that has worldwide consequences. They can help build mosques in cities that have never had one before. They can make friends with Americans that have never seen a Muslim before. And most of all, your children can be a generation of Muslims that can be a lighthouse for the Ahl Bayt in this country, where many of the ships at sea are frankly lost. صلى على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Thank you, Mr. Gehan. Greatly appreciated. Please join me and give hand to Mr. Kevan. Excellent. I didn't know that he has so much information. This is very dense. Did you guys write any question down? No? Okay. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. Our second speaker is Miss Mina Dawalashahi. Mina was born and raised in the Midwest. She attended public school in Chicago suburb. She attended Catholic school. That is questionable, isn't it? I don't know how that's going to turn out, but we're going to hear a lot of information about that. Mina is also Kevan's wife. Mina is going to share her experience growing up in the West, and you will talk about the issue relevant to women in the West. So all women, please write the questions for Mrs. Mina, and let's see how it turns out. Please welcome Mina.
Let me just. So this clicker is just what I use to move forward in that, right? Okay, good. So I had a hard time going about this. Initially, I was like, do I just tell a story about myself, or do I just talk about the issues that I think are important? And then I realized this is a common question that I'm getting, just like from other people, is to talk about the Muslim women. Like if I represent all the Muslim women and all the issues that like they may have. And so the idea I had is actually, instead of saving all the questions toward the end, to have some questions here about what the women think, or even the men, what the men may think that the women's issues are. Because I think that's actually more important than just what I think they are. And so I kind of wanted to stem it towards where it would be more beneficial to like the community members to like kind of voice some opinions and what they think the issues may be, or what they may experience, or what they just hear from friends that they're experiencing from. So I kind of wanted to turn this around and kind of get some feedback from the audience before I start. All right, so I saw my dad's hand. It's very fast, and it's a little biased over here, but I saw his hand go very fast up.
So I want to talk about the question. My question is about a very obvious question. As a woman who are wearing Islamic hijab, that itself, how do you feel and how do you deal with this flag that you constantly waving?
So basically, if I don't know if everyone heard the question, but the idea is the concept of Muslim women kind of having to like represent Islam simply because they're identified immediately across the street whether or not they're like Muslim. While as a man, like if he just simply doesn't really stand out as much as being Muslim as the Muslim women do who wear hijab. So you kind of, for me personally, I feel that I have to, when I'm doing something or I'm standing in a certain area, like let's say they're, like for example, I was in China and we had to stay in a group, but all the group members, they wanted to go inside a bar. And so I had to wait outside, and I was trying to stay as far as from the bar as I could, but at the same time as close to like the group, because I don't know any Chinese, and they want to separate from the group. But as a Muslim doing that, it wasn't only just like an internal conflict of like what I should be doing, but also who's around me, who's seeing me, and what are they getting in the idea of like Islam from? Because they see a Muslim woman and they see her like close to a bar. What does that mean? So a lot of times women don't have to just think about their own personal conflicts if they're trying to, they also have this extra pair of eyes of them, like that they kind of think, at least I think, that I have to represent Islam in a right way. So it's not just about like representing what I want, but also just like what do others see me as representing when if I do a certain action and whatnot. And so there's more pressure, I feel like, because there's, especially if you come from different cultures, like K-Mom was saying before, every culture has their own expectations of what a woman should be like. So you have the American culture, you have like whatever culture your parents came from or like you're associated with. You are constantly kind of balancing those like roles, and you're trying to fit them all. And sometimes they even conflict. So sometimes these cultures are conflicting with one another. They may not be conflicting with Islam, but they conflict with one another. So you may try to, when something conflicts with Islam, is obviously you can say, okay, this is what Islam says, and so I can follow this. But when it doesn't directly conflict with Islam, then you are kind of put in an uncomfortable position. How about from the lady side? All right, my sister's hand. We're bringing a mic to you right now.
Okay, that's okay.
Turn, you just flip the switch. Put it close to your mouth, maybe? No. Just speak loudly, I guess.
Alright. So I think one of the concerns of like in the Muslim women community would be like how to establish yourself. Like you said before, like you have to present yourself in a way that isn't like conflicting with Islam.
Mhm.
So basically what you said, like establishing identity. I think identity is like the most like major concern.
I see.
Yeah, 'cause, like that's all.
So going about identity, we're right now getting a label. So because there's such been like Islamophobia and like kind of like the retaliation or the offense that Muslims have been trying to do has been like, I'm very American. They're trying to prove how American they are as kind of a defense to the Islamophobia. So you see a lot of this kind of movement towards just kind of representing Islam or representing Muslims in a certain light of what they see as being like American and Muslim. And because it's people doing this, not necessarily scholars, you kind of have a wide variety of people who are kind of representing Islam. And it's kind of interesting because you kind of hear stories about, oh, this woman, she associated herself with maybe a magazine that was not so like Islamic or certain like, oh, this woman did this or that woman did this and they wore hijab and that means they represent Islam. And it's kind of very disorganized because anyone could go up and say, okay, this is what I do, and then just simply by what they're wearing, it kind of, that automatically gets associated with Islam. So a Muslim hijabi woman did this or said this, and hence Islam says it. And this is a good thing and a bad thing that we're having like this kind of movement of like people in power and people in the media kind of being shown, because one, there's a voice, there's an outlet for a voice, but at the same time, who are those voices? Who's talking for Islam? And it's one of those things where women, especially, are the kind of the carriers of this voice, and if they're not getting the proper education, or if they're simply don't have enough for these outlets where they're able to practice these skills of speaking in public and whatnot, like they are going to be representing the whole of the group. And this is simply just what I think when I kind of see this picture. But there's other associations with it, and I just kind of want to like pass it on to like the audience and let me know what they see when they see this picture. And I have other pictures to show too. I just kind of want to hear what people are thinking, or like even what I'm saying, if anyone disagrees or has any input on it. All right. So, like I was saying, like we are being spoken for. There's a representation coming out there of like what Muslims are, and I believe, at least as a community, we're not very organized. We don't have really like a strong organization of like, okay, this is what we're going to say and this is what we're going to do. We tend to be disorganized. I think that's one of our major issues that we have as a Muslim communities. We're still developing and still kind of getting to that point of like being established and having a clear kind of say. And this is kind of a really revolutionary moment in our kind of like steps and like our stage in like in America, because we have a platform that we can kind of reach out and talk, and some things where it's like there's a lot of pressures on us too, because there is Islamophobia, there is all this, but at the same time, because of that, there are people talking, and we kind of haven't really said who those people should be, and it's kind of because of that, it's a good thing and it's a bad thing, because you're not really, it's not an organized where there's a scholar talking and saying, okay, I have done all this scholarly work. This is why, like, this is my credibilities to, like, be up here and speaking for Islam, right? If it's ordinary people talking, then they need to be educated. And I think that most people are afraid, and that's why a lot of times when you see this picture, like even the logo is like, we the people are greater than fear. There's a fear associated with it. It's not just, it's a reaction. We are reacting because we're scared, and that's like the worst kind of situation to be reacting. You don't want to speak when you're scared. You want to speak when you're confident. And so we don't want to be reactionary, because that's when when you're reactionary, that's when you see the worst in people. They are doing things out of fear, not out of knowing knowledge. And so it's really important that us as a community, we kind of educate our children and don't just react to things, but we actually do things, and then like people react to us. Or so it's not just us reacting, oh, this person said this and now what are we going to say? Or this person said this, now what are we going to do? So we kind of need to plan and organize ourselves and make sure that we are preparing our children to go out in these environments where they're going to be asked these questions, and then they're actually able to ask questions back because they know enough to ask questions. Because when you don't know, you're not going to ask. You're going to try to stay quiet and listen as much as you can. And that's not a bad thing, because that's what you're supposed to do. But at the same time, it's a time of action, not a time of just waiting and letting things happen. So, I'm gonna go through another, let's see. So another thing I kind of want to address, this is something that I thought was an issue, and it's just that there is women in general in this country. If we go back in the history, women were secondary citizens in this country. Like, they didn't have the right to vote. They didn't have a lot of things, and a lot of people who are coming into this country don't necessarily have that history behind them, but they're going into this country with that history. And so we have to be aware of that was kind of what people, like women, were exposed to in this country, was that they weren't on the same level as men. And so a lot of the children are being exposed to this type of mentality of feminism, and it's like a lot of times this feminism is put in a way where it's like anti-man, like whatever a man does, a woman can do even better, and it's like a competition that's happening, where instead of working together, it's like, instead of one person being, I'm on team red and I'm on team blue and we're gonna fight, and that just causes more chaos. And the reason I'm even relating the whole women being second citizens in the beginning is that that's where this kind of stemmed from, is that women felt powerless initially in this country, and then they felt that they had to then gain that power back by putting down men. And so this is something that we and I am and your children will be exposed to. And how are they supposed to react to that? How are they supposed to think about that? Are these discussions that you're actually having at home, or is this talked about? Because these are things that your children are going to hear and talk about with their friends. And if it's not being talked about at home, they're not going to have a foundation of like where to even stand in that discussion. So that's one thing to also talk about. Also, just like here, I have just pictures of like women wearing hijab, and even like on the side of the hijab, it's like a Nike kind of like symbol. And this is just to say that now they're opening up the markets for like selling products like for Muslims. And again, a lot of things I'm just kind of stating like, this is what's happening. I'm not saying it's good or bad. We just want to know the context of this. And so it's good because we're getting like products for like, there's a market for Muslim women. If there's a market, then there's money involved. If there's money involved, there's power involved. So that means the Muslim women have power in the, like, because now they have value and they can spend money on these products. And so companies care what they think and what they have to say, right? And this is just one of the ways that you can kind of see that there is that type of change happening, where whenever there's a market geared to a certain audience, that audience has power. And they can say, this is what we want, this is not what we want. And so instead of just saying, okay, this is what's out there, they have more of a contribution of like what they can change and what they can kind of like have altered. So this also kind of goes into like consumerism too, where a lot of the people who are targeted like just by just for buying things are women. Women are usually people who are going to be out there shopping, and like they're kind of like the main priorities for just like these kind of like shops, and like so this is just another area, and this is just something I thought it was important, so I just put in there. So, and this is just going according to that, where we see like there's a hijab and it's like $300 like is this encouraged? Is this bad? Is this good? Like, I don't know. This is something that you should really talk to your kids about. If, for my own opinion is that it's not a good thing. That what does it mean to have a very expensive hijab? Like, why are you doing this? But again, it's not really something that's discussed. And so I kind of want to put it out there, make it a point of discussion. Also just about culture, like, culture is, the US is not necessarily like a melting pot. There is like there is like separate, like the separate kind of like separateness according to like cultures, where people kind of like are part of a certain culture, and culture in itself isn't bad, but when culture tends to override Islam, that's when it becomes a bad thing. And so we kind of want to be made aware of that. When does what we think like according to our cultural values and what's right according to Islamic right values. And so we want to have a discussion about that, where what is just based on our culture and what is based in Islam, and just like clarify that for when your kids. Because your kids are just seeing one thing and they may not be able to differentiate between culture and religion. And if that is an issue that's happening, and so having a discussion like that at home is important. In the end, I just want to say it's all about like how you're choosing to represent yourself, that you are in power and you kind of have that voice to say, this is what I think and whatnot. And I say this to not just the women, but also the men, like all Muslims, there's a voice there, we do have that power. And I think that when we become reactionary and we do things out of fear, that power is taken away from us, not from anyone else, but by ourselves. We are limiting ourselves, and we're making ourselves feel powerless. No one else is really doing that. Someone else can say whatever they want to say, but in the end, what we choose to let affect us is what we choose. Like, that's the power we have. And so that's kind of just where I kind of want to end this discussion, simply because how women kind of relate to that is that just like the reason we even talk about women's issue is because there is a power dynamic to that like topic, is that women have issues usually because of like that lack of power. And it's not just women that feel that, but minority groups feel that. And so this is something that we all kind of relate to. And so we kind of just would like to expand that conversation, and inshallah, we talk more about that. So.
Thank you, Mina. Thank you, Mina. Greatly appreciated. Please join me and give a hand to Mrs. Mina. Speaking of fear, you know how I'm standing here and I'm shuddering, like I cannot even pronounce my name. That's how I'm afraid of this microphone right here. It is really very tense, even though I'm just reading a few lines. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. Our third speaker is Abu Hassan or Abu Hassan. Is it Abu Hassan? Abu Hassan. He recently joined our community and he's more than welcome. Thank you for joining us, and he really moved forward pretty quick. He's gonna share with us and give us some more information. That is really great. I mean, it took me almost 4 years just to stand up here. Thank you. Abu Hassan is a father of 4, and inshallah soon to be 5. Thumbs up. He has participated in program in Ahlul Bayt Masjid in his native city of Brooklyn. He participated at the Yasin Educational Foundation when he was living in Southern California, the West and the East Coast, and now in Nebraska. Close enough, South Dakota is close enough. Thank you. You are welcome. His children have been exclusively homeschooled. He is an owner of a construction company and AT&T dealership. The question here to you, Abu Hassan, dealership, I kind of know, you mean you own a store, or is it?
It's a private dealership where we can just have the AT&T products.
Awesome, excellent. Please welcome Mr. Abu Hassan.
Bismillah. Salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Initially, the name of my topic is the impetus for homeschool. And being from Brooklyn and also having spent some time in Los Angeles and the community out there, I know a plethora of families that actually homeschool their children. I was gonna, I'm gonna call all of them and ask them why they decide to homeschool. And then life comes in the way. I got a pregnant wife. I'm trying to homeschool myself. I work from, let's say, 12 to 8 or whatever. And I said, okay, let me turn this to more anecdotal. And I remember something when we were in LA. Because I'm a last minute guy. I remember I took a differential equations class over the summer, a 5-week course, and my first 2 grades were like, I think I had a 50 on my first exam. The second exam was 60. I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna fail. So I started cramming, and my last 3 exams were like 90, 95, and 99. So I'm a last minute guy, but you can't do that with kids. So we're in California one day, me being my last minute self, and my eldest daughter, she has typical black people hair. Not the straight kind, the kind you gotta see on TV sometimes, real rough. So we're late or whatever, it's time for Dua Kamel. The program starts at 8:30, it's 8:15. I'm like, oh my God, your hair's not done. What are we gonna do? I was like, and everybody's happy. Like my son, my daughters, they always love to go to the Husseini. They really enjoy it, but I was like, we can't go. And she was like, why not? And I was like, we're late. I didn't want to tell her. I didn't want to break her heart and say, your hair looks crazy. We're not going to go. But I said, we're late. We can't go. I'm sorry. And she looked at me, I really want to go. I said, she has allergies too. So I said, you can't even eat the food there. Why do you want to go? I like the people there. I want to go. And then I said, okay, I'm just going to have to keep it real with her. I keep it 100 with her. I said, well, your hair looks crazy. We can't take you there like this. And she says, well, I don't think they're gonna treat me bad if they know it's me. At that point, that's when I realized some of the things that I picked up from this culture. And because she was homeschooled, she didn't pick up that stuff. She had more of a pure essence where she said, as long as they know it's me, they're still gonna treat me the same. Who cares about my hair? Like, what's wrong with you? She looked at me like I was a fool, and I was like, all right, let's go. And we went, and she was right. So everybody still gave her a hug. She actually got more hugs that day with her hair like out there. Everybody loved her. It's like, Asia. And I was like, wow. So for me, that was the whole benefit, the whole reason why I wanted to homeschool my kids. I remember, one of my neighbors, he was from Egypt. Well, his name was Sammy. And the other one was Osama. No, Osama and Ahab, sorry. So Osama called himself Sammy. And Ahab, he couldn't hide Ahab. It's just Ahab, you are who you are. So we were like the only ones on the block. There was an Indian guy, he was Hindu, but we were just cool with him. And there was myself, and there was Sammy, which is Osama, and Ahab. And we just had to be cool. And I remember like growing up, times are different now, but we had no choice but to hang out with each other because we were like the different kids, the black guy, the Indian guy, and the Arabs. That's what they were calling back then. So we had no choice because of the environment at the time. We had no choice but to find an enclave within each other. We would go to each other's houses. That was kind of crazy, going into a Hindu's house and them coming to my house and I'm going into but we had no choice. So for me, the impetus of homeschool is a product of my upbringing, what I experienced growing up. And I noticed that a lot of things were, I felt that things were amiss. I felt that, growing up, things that I saw there was like a disconnect. When we got to school, they were saying that, for example, black people are less than, black people are this, and I'm like, how? Like, my pops is a lawyer. Like, what are they talking about? You know what I mean? My grandmother, she grew up in a nice part of Harlem. What are they talking about? My aunt, she was part of the first magazine, the Black People magazine, Ebony or Jet, one of those magazines. I'm like, what are they talking about? But there are other students who happen to be black, and they had like problems with this stuff. They kind of internalized it. Okay, I have to wear my pants a certain way, or I have to have certain affiliations. And we were living in the white people area, mind you. So The impetus for homeschool for me, it was twofold. One was cultural, the other was academic. The cultural thing is I didn't want my kids to have any sort of complexes, especially my daughters. No inferiority complexes, no pressure to feel to achieve the stereotype. I need to prove that I'm this. So the impetus for me, the impetus of homeschool, again, academic and cultural. As far as academic is concerned, I believe that children are like sponges. They can learn an incredible amount. However, if you have them in certain schools, even in the Midwest, because you have a basic curriculum. The schools in the Midwest are pretty good. They're better than I would say NYC, but it's still a school environment. So there's a cap on what the kids can actually learn. Whereas in homeschool, you can give a kid a 10-year-old kid a book with 800 pages, and they don't realize that it's 800 pages. This is the norm for them, and they'll just read it. Like, no big deal, I'm reading this. Or give them, let's say, flashcards from Degree, and, okay, I'm just doing flashcards from Degree. Or my kids actually learned how to read from my father's old bar examination flashcards. They call it critical pass, right, guys? Critical pass. That's like, they didn't think I can't understand this. And I said, don't worry about understanding, just read it. And they would that's how they actually learned how to read. And I remember they were speaking to people about this, and they were looking at them like strange, like, huh? So for me, I felt that there's no limit to what they can learn if you just give them the opportunity. I felt that school has a lot of impediments and obstacles in allowing children to reach their full potential. And one of those impediments will be the cap. These very stringent and rigid lesson plans. Whereas, again, I'm probably more like a free-flowing guy. Like, I taught my kid like algebra before multiplication, which is biting me in the butt now, but because it takes forever for the multiplication part, but the algebra is done immediately. But whatever. That's what. So I felt that you can give kids a lot more in a homeschool setting, and you don't have to correct things as much either. I remember in school when they said that, for example, they said that they brought the Africans over here because the Native Americans were weak or something like that, and they couldn't handle the sun. So that's why they brought the Africans over for slaves, because the Native Americans couldn't handle the sun, and they were just dying. So they had to bring the Africans. Or I remember when they would talk about, let's say, Ayatollah Khomeini, rahmatullah, back in the days or whatever, they would talk about him. And I always had to translate things in my brain. Okay, he's not saying this correctly, he means this, or he's just saying this because, alhamdulillah, my father, he was, I would say, politically conscious, and he always taught me to disbelieve or be a little incredulous when you hear something on the news or you read something in a book. So when they were bad-mouthing Ayatollah Khomeini, rahmatullah, as a young man, I would say, okay, well, why are they saying this? He kind of taught me to be a critical thinker, and again, to be incredulous about the dominant media. But everybody didn't have my father. Some people, they just wholeheartedly, they'll just swallow these things or whatever. And say, okay, Muslims are this. And I'm like, oh my God, how can you believe this? Even amongst black people and Latino people, I'm like, they say all these things about you guys. Why do you wholeheartedly just swallow what they say about Muslims? Well, it's because they've been indoctrinated from pre-K to high school. It's kind of hard to get rid of 12 years of indoctrination in a couple months or a couple days. So for me, the impetus of homeschool was, again, I want the kids to be able to have an open mind. And I told my son, when he's reading something by Howard Zinn right now, People's History of the United States, and I said, but no, you're gonna read their history too, because you have to see the difference. Like he has also read I think it's called a restatement of Islamic history, one of these argument books, the Jado books. I said, no, but you have to read theirs too, so you can know the difference. You can't just, go from one indoctrination to the other. No, it's about being open-minded. If the argument makes sense, it makes sense. If it doesn't make sense, then leave it alone. That was the whole thing. I felt that you can teach them about impartiality with homeschool. You say, okay, this is what these people say, this is what they say, now what do you believe? Being a critical thinker. And that's why I kind of taught them, let's say I tried to introduce math and algebra to them, symbolic reasoning first, because I want them to be critical thinkers. I want them to question everything. Why? I'm always asking why. And they're young, they're 10 and 8 and 6, and it's very difficult for them, but I'm getting them used to asking why. Ask yourself why. Don't just swallow anything. Why? Why does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say this? Why do you think they enslaved the black people, for example? Why? Why are they doing this? What do you see? So the goal is, for me, the impetus for homeschool is not to control. Some people think it's about, oh, you just want to control them. No, actually I don't. I want to empower them. And then go, halas. Let's see what you do now. You have the tools now. You make your decisions. You have all of the information. You know what's out there. You know you're gonna get bombarded with this. As far as, let's say, if it's just in culture, you're gonna have one group of people say, okay, the founding fathers, they did this. America the Great and America the Beautiful, and then you can have other people that say America's awful. Well, where's the truth at? If you only have one side, then it's not going to be accurate. But if you don't know how to critically analyze things, you're not going to be able to do that as well. So I think it's very important, to, again, push mathematics, symbolic reasoning, just analytical thinking with children. Whether they go to school or not, just really force them to be critical thinkers, to challenge things. I always tell my kids, when you read something about, don't necessarily take it at face value. It could be wrong. This person's an author. I think the good thing about having Islam, Muslims, they think, okay, just by rote memorization, yes, indoctrinate this. There's only one perfect book, Kitabullah. That's it. One perfect book. So they know, okay, yeah, well, Stephen Hawking says this, Einstein says this, but they're human, they can make mistakes. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says this. So once they have that foundation, that Islamic foundation, they can kind of get that with homeschool because of the time. I show my son, I say, look, in the morning, we get up, I set out those 7, I said, look outside. He looks out the window. I said, see those kids, they're going to school. They're going to school. That means if they're in their backpack at 6 something going to the school bus, that means they've probably been up since about 5. They've been up at 5. So I felt that you can actually homeschool, if you actually do it correctly, can be more efficient. And so breakfast is here. You don't have to walk too far. Lunch, there's no lunch. Bathroom is very close, so you can't waste too much time going to the bathroom. You can have play, obviously, but it can be more efficient. Especially when you can focus on 1 or 2 kids, in my case 5, where you can just focus on these, okay, do this, and we're done by lunchtime. Obviously, it doesn't happen all the time because they're kids. And again, I'm a last minute guy, and I always follow the plan. But, it can be done. It can be done in a short amount of time. Again, we learned how to read very, very quickly from reading the bar examination flashcards. That's how we learned how to read. Just read it. Read it. And they read it. Read it everywhere. Read it in the car, wherever. Just read it. Trips. Read it. They read it. And the whole world opened up for them. And again, I'm going back to my daughter just because I feel, I always tell my wife this, that, there's so many things that they're doing in this country. There's a lot of great things in this country. There's other things that are a little pernicious and they're subtle. You may not know this. For example, I said, my father told me this as a kid. He said, they have a legal right to lie, the police and the government. They have it's halal for them. This is halal for them to lie. Because they believe that, unlike, us, we don't believe the ends justify. That means they do. So they have a legal right to lie. So when somebody comes in from, let's say, a foreign country, and they're speaking with, let's say, the TSA or somebody like that, they believe, okay, this is a person of authority. Coming from Muslim countries that tend to be a little authoritarian, they're, okay, this is the authority, I have to listen to them. But they're lying. They're lying. As opposed to, coming from here with a more open understanding that they're lying, that it's halal for them to lie, then you kind of can look at them a little bit differently, more critically. Okay, well, they're telling me this, but is it true? So when they tell me that Muslims are terrorists, is it true? When they tell me as a Muslim woman, for example, and this is what I want to, inshallah ta'ala, impart upon my daughters so they understand this, when they tell you that you're being oppressed, don't internalize this, because it may not be true. Maybe it is true. But don't just swallow it wholeheartedly, because it might not be true. So for me, again, the impetus for homeschool, it's twofold. One is cultural, the other is academic. And I think both of those are entwined. I think that, the other thing I want to say is this. I'm rambling, but this is one thing I do want to say. I think you brought it up, Kate, when you said that, when you just have your kids in America, the great Satan, I actually realized when you were talking, I was gonna probably bash, United States a little more, but I'm not. I was thinking about it, I said, I'm the beneficiary of my Muslim neighbors and classmates and friends who were forced to assimilate in this country. So that is the good thing I would say about, the public school system, or just even if it's a private school, it is intermingling with other people. But I think you can do it in college as well, when the kids should be a little bit more stronger. But I do remember that, my friends and neighbors and were very supportive and, gave me a lot of reading material. So again, I was a beneficiary of assimilation. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. But for me, again, I think that I'm more concerned as a black person in the US and having to always translate this stuff. I was fortunate that my father at a very young age taught me this stuff and told me you can't just critically accept everything they tell you. Some people aren't. And they wholeheartedly believe that, everybody's justified in doing everything they do, and Muslims are backwards, and, without the U.S. doing all these things, that, the Muslim world would be doomed, and that's not the case. So again, I'm going to end with this. For me, the impetus for homeschool is to teach kids the cultural aspects and the importance of Islam, and understanding that you don't have to justify being a Muslim. You can wear hijab, you can go offer salat, no big problem. And I think I think we've accomplished that. So much so that my son sometimes, unfortunately, we might go run into a Sunni masjid and he's saying La'an. I'm like, oh my God, you can't say that in a Sunni masjid. And then my kids used to say salam to everyone. No. You say salam to Muslim people, and you just say hi to other people. So, but at least they're unabashedly Muslim. So we've accomplished that. Now we have to teach them to tone it down a little bit. But at least we know they're not ashamed to be Muslim. So I feel that I've accomplished that, and that's the goal. So that's it. Salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Thank you. Back to the podium. Thank you, Abul Hassan. Greatly appreciated. It was an excellent insight. This is really perfect to understand how school, homeschool is really hard, especially it's time consuming, and the level of responsibility kind of a little bit rough, because it takes some of your time or your wife time, because somebody has to bring money home somehow, and that's kind of put you in an awkward position, I would assume. But we really appreciate it, and this is something good to do. Excellent. Thank you again. Would you please give a hand to Abul Hassan? Thank you. One more thing that I was gonna say, I just remember that I think it's in 1920, women were capable to vote. Prior past to that, they cannot vote. And I think to black people, I think in 1960, after Martin Luther King and his movement, then they got the chance to vote. I mean, there was no justice at the beginning, but justice prevailed one way or another. Now we're coming to our last and final speakers. And our fourth speaker is Mr. Sayyid Husseini Yar. Mr. Sayyid Husseini Yar was born in Pashaham or Pashaham?
I was born in north of Tehran.
North of Tehran?
Yes, north of Tehran. There's a village in north of Tehran. It's called Pashaham. There's a village that the rich people, they go and live there.
In Tehran, or closer in the village in Pashaham, and that's in Iran. He raised two girls in the Chicago area. His background in psychology and group therapy. Mr. Said Husseini Yar will share his experience in raising children in the West. Remember, his kids is almost in their 20s at least, 18, 20s. So you have a lot of experience. I'm definitely sure we're gonna learn a lot tonight. Please welcome Mr. Said Husseini.
Assalamu alaikum. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Actually, I was listening carefully to the other speakers and I was taking notes. I wrote two different programs to talk about it here, and each time I changed my mind. And again now, I feel that we really need to ask questions. We really have to be serious, all of us. We have to work. And Mina said that we just bring groups and speakers from here and there, just talk to us, and then we listen and we go home, everything's done, and then we continue the same way that we live every day. Most of our behavior is automatic. It's not based on, learning, driving a car. At the beginning, you are fully aware of what you're doing. You are focusing. Your attention is not divided because it's risky. You might lose your life. But after a while, when you learn, you are not behaving the same way. It's automatic. When you're speaking, it's automatic, right? When you're thinking, just automatically you think. Here we need to really, for the sake of the children, we need to work, the parents in general. I'm talking about including myself. I lived in the United States almost 42 years. Most of my life, twice, I'm 62, 42, 2 years I lived here. And I did not come here to work or go to for education, or I needed to have a better life. None of those things. It was coincident. It was a surgeon, Dr. Christian Bernard. He invited me to come to the United States. So what it is, we have to ask ourselves why we are here. Why we are here. This is a big question, because majority of us, we had no idea where we are going to and what situation we are putting our kids in. Some of the situations are difficult situations. We cannot understand children unless we think like them or feel like them. So here, I just want to briefly go to some of the things that K1 said, and then some of the things Mina said, and also Abu Hassan said here. And this is all about how to raise children in the United States. This country, like many European countries, or many countries in the world, they are secular. Secular means they do not believe in God. They are independent from God. The system. So when you send your children to the public school, their goal is to make your children think like them. They're social engineers. They plan this. And we know it's not something coincident or just, no, this is all planned. And we have identity crisis. And our children have identity crisis. Who am I? This is a question. Who am I? Who am I? We have identity, right? So I am what I think. Therefore, I am what I think, right? That's a Descartes, the French philosopher said, I am what I think. Of course, he got it from Mullah Shabistari. This is not his idea. He took the idea from Mullah Shabistari, which was about 400 years ago. So identity crisis could ruin your children's life. If you don't know who you are, you're not confident about introducing yourself, And when you are in a culture which is hostile to your belief, my question is, why you want to worry about your children? Do you worry the same way that other Americans worry about their children? Or your concern is different from them? Is there something, is it dangerous? Put your kids in this society, might change, might not listen to you. So these are some of the questions that, for the same thing that K1 went through, that was identity crisis when he was younger. He had identity crisis. He didn't know what to say. He had difficulty to explain what his name, or people could not pronounce his name, And then, but we don't want our children to turn out half and half, right? No, we want to make our children to be pure, not half and half, right? But either or, So Mina was saying about all those issues about women, Women in this society are being taken advantage of. They're susceptible. And also they become a tool for the business, They're using them for advertising. They're abusing them. The men's, they make decision mostly for the clothing. The men's are the one who designed all those clothing for women. And when some of them in New York or some other in Los Angeles, if you look at them, what type of men they are, So we have a concern about our children because we want our children to become what? That what is the identity? What do you want your children to become? Muslim, like you, or you want your children to become better Muslim than you? Is that the concern? No, my concern was that I wanted my children to be independent. Do you have some of those things I show some of those people? Oh, it was on there already, right? Yeah, I got it. Okay. Human being in general, we are walking on a timeline. It's like a train. Time is like a train. It's just going forward. Never stops, right? This timeline that we are walking on, or we are living, one side of this line are needs and necessities. The other side is freedom. And this line is very, very, you have this kind of red line. You have to be careful, you need to have equilibrium in your thinking. First of all, you have to be a thinker and think and plan and walk in this line. When you are walking in this line, you have to make choices. Is it? I have something. You have to make choices. And then when we are making choices, either we make a right choices or wrong. And either we are making it or we are breaking it. Sorry. In general, when we live from the Islamic point of view, we live for becoming a good worshipper, to be apt and to serve Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the purpose that you were created. That's the purpose that your children are, So therefore, our responsibility is, if we believe in Islam, I'm talking about the people who believe in Islam, responsibility is that to become a better apt to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we have constitutions, the Quran is our constitutions, we have muhkamat and mutashabihat, we have all those laws is written, we don't need to add anything to it. The Quran is complete, and you all know that, we all when we go to masjid. And since we live, we have certain needs, right? And those needs are, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, He's the best provider It's the best provider. It's a risk. We all have a risk, and we all have in our life, we have certain nema. Certain nema is inner resources or outer resources, your income, whatever comes to your life, it's a nema. Whatever comes to your life. And whatever you are consuming from what comes in your life, it's your risk. You cook some food and suddenly something happened, you left the house, and then the other children or family members, they ate that. So your risk, that was not your risk, even though you yourself cooked it. But that was a nema, right? And that nema, the result of that nema is a barakah. Barakah is the outcome. And many people, they have plenty nema comes, but they don't have time to consume those nema. They collect money, they become wealthy, and then they just preoccupied workaholic, and then suddenly they realize it's time to go. And so, well, I didn't enjoy my life. I've been working all this time. And they leave it for a while for 2 children or grandchildren, whatever, So it means the risk was very little, but the nema was very much. What was the barakah? You need to never consume, never use this one for the good things, which is in the way of Allah, fi sabilillah. Okay? Now about how to be a relationship with the children, how to raise children in the United States. In general, I believe that developing a relationship with the children means that I remember from first when Mina was born, I stopped overtime. I said I will never work overtime. Why? Because I have responsibility. Not because I don't have needs. I had needs, but I came between necessity and freedom. I decided to forget about my necessities, to be free to be at the service of my daughter, that to spend time. If you don't spend time with your child, how do you expect that you have that type of relationship to be mutually beneficial? So therefore it's so important, especially for fathers, to spend time at home with the children. Of course, Muslim people in general, they want to be a provider. Now, besides to being provider, you are a father. And to be father, there's a responsibility. Means your children, they should know you. And you should know your children. Majority of us, we claim we know our children. But when they are grown up, they become independent or become teenagers, then we have problems. Why? Because we really do not know. Now suddenly I want to control this teenager, I have a problem. So, when talking to the children, it's so important to be non-threatening communication. In general, since parents, especially fathers, when children, they look at the fathers, they see them, they are too big and they are too small, and they get scared. Just your physical being is threatening to them. So it's so important for the child to go to that level and changing the voice and speaking the language of the children. So we need to modify our behavior in order to communicate with our children in a non-threatening. And then the next one is nurturing success, because we know all the children, they have, Hassan, you mentioned that the children are like a sponge. They learn so much, especially from the age 1 and from the age born till 7 years old. What you learn in that 7 years is more than whatever you learn for the rest of your life. Even if you become a professor of university, that one, learning a language. Now, if you decide to learn a language, how long is it going to take for you to learn a language? For a child, very quickly. Not only they learn your language, they learn your posture, your gesture, your body movement, your facial expression. They learn. And an actor has to go to 4 years, 5 years in a university to learn all those acting, but that child learn everything within first few years. So this is the way. So the children, they do not learn from what you say. They never learn from what you say. They learn what you do. So therefore, we need to work that whatever we say and what we do to be in the same level, And if never, no matter how many times said, do not lie, do not lie, do not lie. And if once you lie and they realize, they learn that. They learn when they are older, especially when they're after 10, 11, 12, 13 years, at that time they start learning from their friends. What are the friends they say? They learn from the saying of their friends. But from the behavior-wise, they learn from parents. Many of our children reflecting us. If we spend enough time with them, those are ourselves. We look at ourselves in the mirror. The environment has to be loving environment. So your relationship with the children, it depends with your relationship with the rest of the member of the family. Doesn't matter who lives in that family. If you have a harmonious relationship with the members of the family and making the environment loving environment, this is the environment the children they need. Of course, foster the freedom to choose, Since we think children did not know better, they do not have experience, we downplay them and we sometimes disregard their concerns. And it is they are smart. Sometimes some of the children are smarter than their parents. But we do not want to recognize it. Just why? Because they are younger than us. Because they have less experience. We think since we have more experience, so therefore, they just have to listen to us. Of course, they have to. That's part of the training. But we also need to listen to them. We listen to them and communicate with them and coming to a conclusion, mutual agreement, and it is possible. Of course, we want to use our experience to guide them based on Islamic teaching, and we have many role models. Nobody have an excuse that, just has not been much studies about the life of the family of the Prophet, sallallahu alayhi. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala Muhammad. Just imagine about sister Bibi Zainab, the sister of Imam Hussein, right? What about relationship? Today, how many of us we could see that type of relationship in the families? The brother Abbas, Hazrat Abbas alayhi salam, he was the brother, a step-brother of him. See a brother, how a brother for all his life at the service of a stepbrother, right? It's amazing. It's amazing. He sacrificed himself, right? We have so many role models. If you just pay attention to the Ahlul Bayt family, the best examples comes there. We need that develop that harmonious relationship with our family members based on their role models, if we are really following the Ahlul Bayt. In general, of course, there are so many stuff. I do not want to go through everything, but I want to. Let's go to the next one, because just a few things I want to. Did I make a mistake? Some of these things, I have a lot of just to be available to children. No, so you have to make time. Keep the sharing mutual interest. So that's take children to the special religious places. Or there's sometimes you say, okay, it's not, I don't have time, or it's not that important. It's very important socialization. If the parents are socializing, the children then learn to socialize. If the parents that are reclusive and they are hiding and they have a hard time to communicate with others, then the children are going to have it. You want our children to be to represent themselves, to be proud of themselves. Majority of the Muslims, they have a low self-confidence. They do not have self-confidence. They are not, they are very affected. The social Islamophobia really affected them. And then, even though if you're not saying, the children, they learn from their parents that this is the best way to learn. Because my dad, my mom, they live like this. They were hiding. And while you're hiding, you are the best. You have the best examples. Yeah, if you are the best behavior, while we're hiding. So it's important to interact and socialize and take our children to weddings, together, of course, in the Islamic environment. But that is a very important part of the, and, went back to the same, okay. I'm just going to say some of these things because there's not enough time, point out their increasing skills or knowledge, because when they're growing, when they're learning, and they're learning skills, they learn, so we need to bring it to their attention and to encourage them. Wow, I recognize, yes, they're learning new vocabulary, that's wonderful. And this is, they know you are referring to their inner resources, that they're developing the inner resources for success in the future, A story. Telling a story is the most, I'm going to say that one and I'm going to stop right there. And we all have stories, right? We all have stories. Some of us are good storytellers, some of us bad. Like me, I'm a bad storyteller, but the whole life is about stories. All those movies, all those documentaries, all those, anybody to talk is about the stories. And we need to tell stories to our children about ourselves, about our background, and about others. And we want them to tell stories to us from whatever experience they have, to become a good storytellers. One of the success of the Western media is especially British media, they are good storytellers. They are the best storytellers. Like in Hollywood, it's a good story, all those things that we watch, because they learn. From whom they learned it? From Muslims. Muslims in the past, they would tell stories. In Quran is full of stories. Why Allah is giving all those stories to us? We need how the version is important. There is one story, but you could have different version of the same stories and make it interesting to the children. And if you want, I remember that I was, to my children, I was telling them stories. I would never say, don't do that or do this. I would say some stories, which I fabricated stories sometimes. I was at work, I came home and I said there was a black bird. Just came to my office by the window and calling me. And then I asked, how is the bird calling you? I said, I'm making noise, I said, like this bird was making, and they said, wow. And then I was playing like an actor. I was just right there, and they will enjoy it. And if they enjoy, they learn. So we have to become a child, like to Toys R Us. We have to act, like them and to be the same level. And some of them, they feel lonely. They feel there's not enough variety in the house. It's boring. And anytime you think you are saying something that you realize your child is bored, stop right there. Because children, they are smart. The people who get bored, majority of the people who get bored, because this is ordinary. They want something more sophisticated, more difficult, more challenging, So I just, tell stories to them and tell it in different ways. And sometimes you could repeat the same stories if the children, they did not learn from that story and made some mistakes. I remember I used to ask them, each time you make mistake, when I come home, if you tell me, I'll give you $1. And then if you make the same mistakes, then you have to give me $5. And then I talked about this, I talk at work, I talked with other psychologists, and of course some of them, they said, you are encouraging them to make mistakes. I said, no, I'm encouraging them to be brave. That we all make mistakes. Those people who are scared to make mistakes, they never get anywhere. You limit yourself because we are perfectly imperfect. So since we are imperfect, the only perfect is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The rest of being in this universe, they are imperfect. One of the reasons that everything is moving You know, everything is moving and doing subhanallah, 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 at the service of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is because of imperfection. Our imperfection is not liability. It's an asset to be imperfect. But many of us, we cover up them. We don't want people to feel and find out I'm not the best. Oh, I made a mistake when I was speaking. I did not do a good speak. No, we are imperfect. We are imperfect. We make mistakes, knowingly or unknowingly. And that's when we need to realize that we are vulnerable. And when we are vulnerable, we have a plan. And we protect ourselves and protect our children. And our children are very vulnerable in this society because in this society, their goal is to change them, to make someone like Michael Jackson. Those are, you know, that's true, that when you're talking about Michael Jackson was African American, or looked, but he didn't, you know. He wanted to look more white, bleachy, you know. And most of the friends around. The racism is a foundation of this country is based on racism. You know, no, it's not, you know, because the reason I'm saying that not because of hate. I love America. I'm 40 years. I serve American people, you know, and I will serve the rest of my life. I will serve American people. It's nothing to do with American people. It's to do with the system, satanic. There's somebody says the great Satan, right? And not because, you know, I never scared of it. You know, I'll talk to everybody. You know, great Satan. Do we have a small Satan or non-great Satan? We have only one Satan, right? Which say Shaitan was supposed to mislead human being. Only the enemy of human being. It's nothing to do with the mosquitoes or with chicken or cows or trees. This one not only harms human beings, harms plants, harms chickens. Look at it, how they raise chickens in the small little cages. They put them because of the, you know, and then these poor chickens, they cannot open their wings. Or they give them what they feed the cows. All those chemicals that they use for, you know, what is all is for profit, and this is the mother of capitalism, right? It's all about profit. We commit so many crimes for the sake of profit. So therefore, it's just, you know, don't be scared of, you know, being different. You know, at least we have this freedom. That's true. We have this freedom to discuss this kind of things. But many people they do not take. This is ni'mah. That's ni'mah that I said. These are also ni'mah. Ni'mah is not just material things. You know, if you meet someone, that might be a ni'mah, you know. So this is a ni'mah. So when you do not use ni'mah, it's a kufr ni'mah, right? It's a kufr ni'mah. And kufr ni'mah as a punishment. So therefore, this is a ni'mah here. We love Americans, we love all human beings, you know. But if we love justice more, we love justice more than anything. I love justice more than our family. Why? Because justice is a principle. We do not compromise our principles, especially when we are good people, when we are harmonious people, when we love people, when we are at the service of Allah, the service of the people. We have no self-interest, you know. So we respect everybody, you know, and we want them to respect us too. So therefore, I have my time is over for a long time ago. I'm going to sit down. If you have any questions, you know, I will answer those questions. And the rest of I have more idea. The rest of the stuff, I know you could follow up, and if anybody wants a copy of this, no problem, I could give you a copy of this. And these are all the things. There are so many books. I was going to bring you a list of the books that you could read about how to raise children, you know, as a Muslim in America. There are ways to raise good children here. There's an opportunity, but those are for the people who devote themselves for their children. Children are helpless. You know, they cannot help themselves. We need to help them. That's why we took the responsibility to be good parents. The children are wonderful. There is no bad children. All children are wonderful. So therefore, we have to help them, to guide them to their service, and ask their question, and asking them to ask questions. And the first thing that Islam teaches us is La ilaha illallah. La. That's the first word. No other religion teaches that. Say no. We are always telling our children to say yes, or the system, in the army, yes sir, yes sir. No, a Muslim questions why. Brother Abu Hassan was saying that why? Question. A good question is much better than hundreds, thousands of answers. A good questions. So we have to question our children to question. Even question us, that's okay. Salaam alaikum. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Said Husseini Yar. Please give a hand to Mr. Said Husseini. Okay, I'm done with reading from the paper, thank God. Now, let's keep going with this. What we learned today from the 4 speakers. I would say, in my case, I would look at the first one with Mr. Kevan when you spoke about people asking you about your faith, which is really difficult because my kid has been asked the same questions. But there are something that you really talked about that my kid never really tell me about it. He probably told his mom, and his mom maybe never told me. So I could see the hardship that you went through, and so does my kid went through more than maybe what you adore. But it is really hard to raise a kid in America. And the second one is Mrs. Mina. We have great respect for all of you wearing hijab, and we really worship anything you guys do, for a matter of fact. In fact, my wife is a Christian, and she never looked at anyone who wear hijab differently than a human being that looks like her in any shape or form. So don't walk with your heads up. You're great and you look good. And the third one is homeschool. Homeschool is a tough challenge, and it's really hard on parents. And I do see maybe the kids will learn more, and they will be less, I'm not gonna use the word poison, but they will be far away from other things that is not really suitable for kids to learn in public school. To the point where even my kids had a little debate with him, and they told him that is the promised land is for certain people. And I was shocked, and I told him, what? And he said, yeah, God gave him the land. And I'm thinking like, okay, where did you learn that? And basically he learned it at school. And finally, when we come back to Mr. Said Husseini, he said, bring your kids to the mosque or to the special Muslim community, which is really very, very important. And what we notice is, or what I notice exactly raising my own child, is when I look at my brothers are raising their children basically learn it from community, from their cousins, from their, if they are living within the same neighborhood where they grew up, where everyone around them practicing the same faith. So they would have less hardship, and much easier to learn and grasp the faith, grasp the cultures, and learn more and become more aware of anything around them. But when you are living in America, basically, from home to school, school back to home, and maybe a little physical education. And so that is make kids basically almost either jailed at home or jailed at school, almost. And so that's why when kids comes to the center and they start screaming and running around and yelling, some of the staff or some of the members maybe get a little agitated. I happy. I hope they never quit. Just keep running and joking and scream. Just give us 1 hour for the lecture, and that's all we need. So bring your kids. You are welcome all the time, and thank you so much for joining us. And now I'm gonna have 4 chairs brought up forward, and I need all 4 speakers to come forward. And this time will be only youth. Youth, you're going to ask the questions to the 4 speakers. So please, Amjad, help me bringing 4 chairs up front. Much easier not to read.
What's the age?
Yes. Yes, just 4 chairs. Have a seat. And
How much time do they have?
I have 5 minutes. Okay, ask that. That's good.